The morning started like any other Thursday in my 15-year career at Meridian Technologies. I arrived at 7:30 a.m., an hour before anyone else, as had been my routine since day one. The familiar hum of the server room greeted me as I walked through the corridors of the mid-sized software company that had become more than a workplace. It was my second home, my pride, my life's work. I was Sarah Chen, Senior Systems Architect, Employee ID 1047, and I had watched this company grow from a scrappy startup of 12 people to a thriving enterprise of over 200 employees. I had architected the core systems that powered our flagship products, mentored dozens of junior developers, and sacrificed countless weekends and holidays to ensure our clients never experienced a moment of downtime. My dedication wasn't just professional, it was personal. Meridian wasn't just my employer, it was my legacy. But as I settled into my workstation that morning, reviewing the quarterly infrastructure reports, I had no idea that my world was about to collapse with a single email from HR. According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Sarah, please report to Conference Room B at 9:04 a.m. Jennifer Walsh, Human Resources. The message was terse, clinical, devoid of the usual pleasantries Jennifer typically included. A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I reasoned it away. Perhaps it was about the promotion to VP of Engineering that had been dangling in front of me for the past 6 months. Maybe they were finally ready to make it official. I knocked on the conference room door at exactly 9 a.m. Jennifer sat across from a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, expensive suit, calculating eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. To Jennifer's right sat Marcus Holloway, our CEO, the man I had helped build this company from the ground up, but Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sarah, please sit down," Jennifer said, her voice carrying an unfamiliar formality. "This is Richard Blackwood from Blackwood Consulting. He's been conducting a comprehensive review of our operations." I shook Richard's hand, noting his firm grip and the way his eyes seemed to catalog everything about me in that brief moment. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't articulate what. "Sarah," Marcus finally spoke, his voice strained, "I want you to know this is one of the hardest conversations I've ever had to have." The words hit me before their meaning fully registered. My breath caught. Due to organizational restructuring and the need to streamline our operations, Jennifer continued, reading from a prepared script, "your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The room tilted. 15 years of 60-hour weeks, of building systems that generated millions in revenue, of training the very people who would apparently continue without me. "I don't understand," I managed. "My performance reviews have all been exceptional. The Hartwell project I just completed saved the company $2 million annually. The new security protocols I implemented—" "This isn't about performance," Richard interjected smoothly. "It's about efficiency. Modern businesses require leaner structures, more agile approaches to technology management." I looked at Marcus, searching for the man who had once called me his right hand, who had promised me a partnership track, who had stood as best man at my wedding 3 years ago. But he was studying his hands as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Marcus," I said quietly. He finally looked up, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than anger or disappointment. It was guilt, heavy and suffocating. "Sarah, the board made this decision. My hands are tied." "The board?" I almost laughed. "Marcus, you are the board. You own 60% of this company." The silence stretched until Richard cleared his throat. "Miss Chen, we've prepared a generous severance package. 6 months' salary, continuation of health benefits for a year, and a positive reference letter. 6 months' salary for 15 years of dedication." I thought about my mortgage, my student loans from the advanced degrees I'd earned to better serve this company, my husband David, who had supported my career even when it meant missed dinners and canceled vacations. "I need a moment," I said, standing on unsteady legs. "Of course," Jennifer said, her professional mask slipping just enough to reveal genuine discomfort. "Take all the time you need." I walked to the window overlooking the parking lot, where my Toyota Camry sat next to Marcus's new Tesla, a car I had congratulated him on just last week. The morning sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, and I found myself thinking about all the mornings I had stood in this very building, planning innovations, solving crises, building something I thought would last forever. When I returned to my seat, I had made my decision. "I'll sign your papers," I said quietly, "but I want you all to know something. This company exists because of people like me. The systems, the architecture, the institutional knowledge. You're not just eliminating a position, you're cutting out the heart of this operation." Richard's smile was patronizing. "I appreciate your passion, Miss Chen, but I assure you, we have comprehensive transition plans in place." I signed where they indicated, accepted the cardboard box Jennifer handed me, and walked back to my desk to pack 15 years of my life into 18 inches of corrugated cardboard. My colleagues watched with a mixture of sympathy and relief. Sympathy for my situation, relief that it wasn't them. I understood. In today's economy, everyone was just trying to survive. As I packed my degrees, my awards, the photo of David and me at last year's company holiday party, Marcus appeared at my cubicle. "Sarah, don't," I said without looking up. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. We both know what this really is. It's business, Sarah. Nothing personal." I finally looked at him then. This man I had trusted, respected, followed into battle against impossible deadlines and demanding clients. "Marcus, everything about this is personal. You just don't have the courage to admit it." He left without another word. The drive home was a blur of suburban streets and traffic lights that seemed to mock my careful, law-abiding approach to life. I had played by the rules, worked hard, been loyal, and where had it gotten me? Unemployed at 38, with a mortgage, and a marriage that was about to be tested by financial uncertainty. David was in his home office when I walked through the front door at 10:47 a.m., still carrying my cardboard box of corporate memories. "Sarah, what are you doing home so early?" He looked up from his computer screen, concern immediately creasing his features when he saw my face. I set the box on the kitchen counter and told him everything. David listened without interruption, his expression shifting from confusion to anger to protective fury. "15 years," he said finally. "After everything you've done for that company, this is unbelievable." "It's happening," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "The question is, what do I do now?" David pulled me into his arms, and for the first time since walking into that conference room, I let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. The tears came then, hot and bitter, carrying away 15 years of professional identity. But even as I grieved, something else was taking root in my mind, a seed of determination that would, in time, grow into something Marcus Holloway would learn to fear. The next few weeks were a masterclass in humility. I applied for positions at every tech company within a 100-mile radius, swallowed my pride to accept interviews for roles far beneath my qualifications, and learned to navigate the soul-crushing world of modern job hunting, where algorithms screened out applications before human eyes ever saw them. The responses were consistent: overqualified, overpriced, or the dreaded "we've decided to move forward with another candidate." My 15 years of experience, once my greatest asset, had become an anchor dragging me down in a market that valued youth and desperation over wisdom and stability. It was during my third week of unemployment that I discovered what Marcus and Richard Blackwood had really been up to. I was having coffee with Janet Morrison, my former colleague, and one of the few people at Meridian who had stayed in touch after my firing. Janet worked in accounting and had always been a straight shooter, unafraid to speak truth to power. "Sarah," she said, glancing around the coffee shop as if we were planning a heist, "there are things you need to know about what happened to you." "Such as?" "Richard Blackwood isn't just a consultant, he's a corporate raider. He specializes in identifying redundant senior employees at mid-sized companies and helping ownership reduce their labor costs." I felt that familiar cold knot in my stomach. "Go on." "But that's not the worst part. Marcus brought him in specifically to target you." "That doesn't make sense. Why would Marcus want to get rid of me?" Janet looked uncomfortable. "You remember the Nexus project? The one you architected last year?" Of course I remembered Nexus. It was my masterpiece, a revolutionary data management system that had increased client processing speeds by 400% and positioned Meridian as a leader in enterprise software solutions. The project had generated $8 million in new contracts in its first 6 months. "Marcus has been shopping Nexus around to potential buyers," Janet continued. Apparently, there's a consortium of investors interested in purchasing the technology for somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million. My coffee turned cold in my hands. That's impossible. Nexus isn't just software. It's an integrated system that requires institutional knowledge to maintain and develop. You can't just sell it like a commodity. Unless, Janet said quietly, you eliminate the person who created it and might have legal claims to it. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. My employment contract, signed 15 years ago when Meridian was a startup and I was naive about intellectual property law, contained broad language assigning all work product to the company. But Nexus was different. I had developed key components on my own time, using my own resources, and had only integrated them into the company system after Marcus specifically requested it. More importantly, I had documentation. Emails, development logs, version control records that proved my individual contribution to the system. In the wrong hands, or rather, the right hands, that documentation could complicate any sale of the Nexus technology. There's more, Janet said. Richard Blackwood's firm is getting a percentage of any asset sales they facilitate. And Marcus has been telling people that with you gone, he can finally optimize the technology for market conditions. I sat back in my chair, stunned by the scope of the betrayal. This wasn't just about eliminating my salary. This was about stealing my work, my innovation, my intellectual legacy, and profiting from it while ensuring I could never claim credit or compensation. Janet, are you sure about this? She nodded grimly. My cousin works at Blackwood Consulting. She's seen the preliminary agreements. Sarah, they're planning to close the deal within 6 months, and then most likely shut down Meridian's operations and sell off the remaining assets. I thought about my former colleagues, good people who had worked just as hard as I had, who were about to be sacrificed for Marcus's greed. I thought about the clients who depended on Meridian systems, who would be left stranded when the company ceased to exist. Most of all, I thought about the 15 years of my life I had invested in building something meaningful, only to watch it be carved up and sold for parts. But as I drove home that evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight Marcus and Richard in court. I wasn't going to hire lawyers or file complaints or wage a public relations war. I was going to do something much more devastating. I was going to beat them at their own game. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with David and spread out every document I had from my years at Meridian. Employment contracts, project specifications, development logs, email archives, performance reviews, financial reports I had access to as a senior employee. What are you thinking? David asked, watching me organize the papers with the methodical precision I had learned during my years in system architecture. I'm thinking that Marcus and Richard made a critical error, I said. They assumed that eliminating me would eliminate the threat to their plans, but they forgot something important, which is, I didn't just build Meridian's technology. I understand their entire business model, their client relationships, their operational weaknesses, and most importantly, their market position. David was quiet for a moment. Sarah, please tell me you're not planning anything unethical. Quite the opposite, I said, smiling for the first time in weeks. I'm planning to compete. The look on his face was priceless. Compete? Honey, you just lost your job. How are you going to compete with an established company that's about to close a $50 million deal? I pulled out my laptop and opened a spreadsheet I had been working on since my conversation with Janet. Because Marcus and Richard are making the same mistake that every corporate raider makes. They're so focused on extracting value that they've forgotten how value is actually created. For the next hour, I walked David through my analysis. Meridian's technology was impressive, but it wasn't irreplaceable. The real value of the company lay in its client relationships, its reputation for reliability, and its ability to provide ongoing support and development. Marcus was planning to sell the technology and eliminate the operational infrastructure. But technology without support is worthless. Clients without ongoing development partnerships will inevitably look for alternatives. What if, I said, those clients had somewhere better to go? David was beginning to understand. You want to start your own company. Not just start one, I want to build something better. Something that addresses all the limitations I identified in Meridian systems, but could never get approval to fix. I opened my laptop and showed him the preliminary designs I had been sketching during my unemployment. a next-generation data management platform that incorporated everything I had learned during my 15 years at Meridian, but built from the ground up with modern security protocols, scalable architecture, and user-friendly interfaces. I call it Phoenix, I said, and I think it's going to change everything. David was quiet for a long time, studying my designs, my financial projections, my timeline for development, and market entry. This is going to take everything we have, he said finally. Our savings, our retirement funds, probably a second mortgage on the house. I know, and there's no guarantee it will work. Marcus has a head start, established relationships, significant resources. I know, and even if you succeed, it could take years to build a sustainable business. I know, he closed the laptop and looked at me directly. When do we start? The next morning, I began the most important project of my career, not building software or managing systems, but constructing a future that would prove that integrity and innovation could triumph over greed and betrayal. I started by reaching out to former colleagues who had been casualties of Meridian's restructuring over the years, good people who had been pushed out as the company grew, and Marcus became more focused on profit margins than personnel development. The first was Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a brilliant database specialist who had been laid off 2 years earlier when Marcus decided his salary was too high for someone who just managed data. Michael was working as a freelance consultant, underutilized and underpaid. "Sarah," he said when I called, "I heard about what happened to you. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, Michael. Be interested. How would you like to build something that makes Meridian look like a prototype?" Within a week, I had assembled a team of 5 former Meridian employees, each of whom brought specialized expertise and a personal motivation to prove that Marcus had made a terrible mistake in letting them go. We called ourselves Phoenix Technologies, and we incorporated with David handling the legal paperwork, and me contributing our entire savings as startup capital. We rented a small office space in a converted warehouse across town from Meridian's gleaming corporate headquarters. It was cramped, poorly lit, and furnished with secondhand equipment, but it had something Meridian lacked: a sense of purpose that went beyond profit. The development phase was brutal. We worked 18-hour days, survived on coffee and takeout food, and pushed ourselves to the limits of our technical expertise. But slowly, steadily, Phoenix began to take shape. The system we were building wasn't just an improvement on Meridian's technology. It was a revolutionary approach to enterprise data management that addressed every complaint, every limitation, every frustration I had encountered during my years maintaining Meridian's increasingly obsolete infrastructure. Where Meridian's system required extensive customization for each client, Phoenix was designed for plug-and-play implementation. Where Meridian's architecture was vulnerable to security breaches, Phoenix incorporated military-grade encryption. Where Meridian's user interface required extensive training, Phoenix was intuitive enough for non-technical personnel to operate. But the real innovation was in Phoenix's learning capabilities, using machine learning algorithms that I had been researching during my personal time at Meridian. Phoenix could optimize its own performance based on each client's usage patterns, essentially becoming more efficient over time. It was everything I had wanted to build at Meridian, but had been prevented from developing by Marcus's short-term thinking and budget constraints. As we worked, I kept in touch with Janet, who provided regular updates on Meridian's deteriorating situation. The company was hemorrhaging talent as word spread about the planned sale and shutdown. Client satisfaction was declining as the remaining technical staff struggled to maintain systems they didn't fully understand. And Marcus was becoming increasingly desperate as potential buyers began to question the viability of acquiring technology without the human resources to support it. "He's been asking about you," Janet told me during one of our coffee meetings. "Marcus wants to know what you're working on." "What did you tell him?" "That you're consulting for various clients while looking for a permanent position. But Sarah, people are starting to ask questions. Some of our former colleagues have been very quiet about their current projects." I smiled. Let him wonder. By month 4 of Phoenix's development, we were ready for beta testing. I reached out to 3 of Meridian's smaller clients, companies I had worked with directly, and who had always appreciated my personal attention to their technical needs. The first was Hartwell Industries, the manufacturing company whose data management system I had personally optimized during my final project at Meridian. When I called their IT director, James Hartwell, he was immediately interested. "Sarah, we've been having nothing but problems since you left Meridian. Our system crashes twice a week, and their support team doesn't understand the customizations you implemented. We've been thinking about switching providers. What if I told you I could offer you something better than what you currently have at half the cost, with guaranteed uptime and personal support from the development team? I'd say you have my attention. The Hartwell beta test was a revelation. Phoenix performed flawlessly, processing their data 300% faster than Meridian's system while using 60% fewer computational resources. James was so impressed that he agreed to serve as a reference client and provide a testimonial for our marketing materials. Word spread quickly in the tight-knit community of mid-sized manufacturers and service companies that comprised Meridian's client base. Within 2 months, we had completed successful beta tests with 6 companies and received preliminary commitments from 4 others. But the real breakthrough came when I received a call from someone I hadn't expected to hear from again. "Sarah, this is Patricia Vance from Consolidated Financial." Patricia was the CTO of Meridian's largest client, a financial services firm that accounted for nearly 30% of Meridian's annual revenue. She was also one of the most respected technology executives in the region, someone whose opinion carried significant weight in the industry. "Patricia, how can I help you?" "I think the question is how I can help you. I've been hearing interesting rumors about a new company called Phoenix Technologies, and I've been having some very frustrating conversations with Meridian lately." She went on to explain that Meridian's service quality had declined dramatically since my departure. System outages that would have been resolved in hours were taking days to fix. Technical support calls were being handled by junior staff who lacked the knowledge to address complex issues. And most concerning, Marcus had been pressuring her to upgrade to a new and improved version of their software that sounded suspiciously like a repackaging of existing technology with a higher price point. "I've been working with Meridian for 8 years, Patricia said, "but frankly, I'm losing confidence in their ability to support our needs. Would you be interested in making a presentation to our board?" 3 weeks later, I stood in the boardroom of Consolidated Financial, presenting Phoenix to a panel of executives who controlled a technology budget in the millions of dollars. I was nervous but prepared, armed with performance data, cost projections, and a demonstration system that showcased Phoenix's capabilities. The presentation went flawlessly. Phoenix not only outperformed Meridian's current system but offered features that no competitor could match. The learning algorithms impressed the technical staff, the cost savings got the attention of the financial team, and the reliability metrics convinced the executives who had grown tired of explaining system outages to their own clients. At the end of the presentation, Patricia asked the question I had been hoping to hear: "Sarah, when can you begin implementation?" "We can start next month," I replied, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. "Full deployment within 120 days. The contract with Consolidated Financial was worth $2.3 million annually, more than enough to establish Phoenix as a viable company and validate our technology in the marketplace. But more importantly, it sent a clear message to Meridian's other clients that there was a new player in the market, one led by the person who had originally built much of Meridian's technical infrastructure." The day I signed the Consolidated Financial contract, I received a call from Marcus. "Sarah, we need to talk." His voice carried a strain I had never heard before, the sound of a man watching his carefully laid plans crumble around him. "I'm listening, Marcus. I hear you've been talking to some of our clients." "Former clients, actually." Patricia Vance terminated Meridian's contract yesterday. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. "Sarah, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your departure from Meridian was never personal. It was a difficult business decision. But the door is always open for you to return." I almost laughed. "Return to what, Marcus? A company that's planning to sell off its technology and shut down operations?" Another silence, longer this time. "I don't know what you think you know." "I know everything, Marcus. I know about Richard Blackwood's real role. I know about the $50 million sale. I know about your plan to eliminate anyone who might have claims to the Nexus technology." "Sarah, you're making accusations that—" "I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts. And here's another fact for you. Phoenix Technologies has just signed a contract with Consolidated Financial to replace the system I originally designed for them at Meridian. We'll be implementing next month." "You can't do this. Your employment contract—" "My employment contract was terminated when you fired me, Marcus. I owe Meridian nothing. But more importantly, I don't owe you anything. Sarah, please, let's meet and discuss this reasonably. I'm sure we can work out some kind of arrangement." The time for arrangements was 6 months ago, when you decided to eliminate me rather than promote me. Good luck with your asset sale, Marcus. I hope Richard Blackwood's fees are worth what they're going to cost you. I ended the call and sat back in my chair, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because justice was finally being served. Sadness because it had come to this. Because 15 years of professional relationship had been destroyed by greed and betrayal. Over the next few months, the marketplace rendered its verdict on Marcus Holloway's business strategy. Phoenix Technologies signed contracts with 7 of Meridian's former clients, including 2 of their largest accounts. Our reputation for reliability and innovation spread through industry networks, bringing inquiries from companies that had never worked with Meridian but were impressed by our technology and approach. Meanwhile, Meridian's situation deteriorated rapidly. The planned asset sale fell through when potential buyers realized that purchasing the technology without the human resources to support it was essentially worthless. Client defections accelerated as word spread about the company's instability and declining service quality. Key employees who had survived the initial layoffs began jumping ship to competitors who offered better job security. By the end of our first year in operation, Phoenix Technologies had grown to 15 employees and generated $8.7 million in revenue. We moved to larger offices in a modern building downtown, invested in state-of-the-art equipment, and began developing the next generation of our technology platform. Meridian, meanwhile, that was fighting for its survival. Marcus had been forced to accept a buyout offer from a larger competitor at a fraction of his original asking price. The deal included the liquidation of most of Meridian's assets and the termination of remaining employees, exactly what Janet had predicted 18 months earlier. The final chapter of this story came on a cold Tuesday morning in March, almost exactly 2 years after Marcus had fired me from my position at Meridian Technologies. I was in my office at Phoenix, a corner suite with windows overlooking the city, decorated with awards from satisfied clients and photos of our growing team, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Sarah, there's a Marcus Holloway here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I felt a familiar knot in my stomach, but this time it was accompanied by something else, a sense of completion, as if a long journey was finally reaching its destination. "Send him in." Marcus entered my office looking like a man who had aged 5 years in 2. His expensive suits had been replaced by business casual attire, his confident bearing was gone, and his eyes carried the hollow look of someone who had lost everything important to him. "Sarah," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Marcus?" He looked around my office, taking in the success that surrounded us, the tangible evidence of what he had lost when he chose to betray me. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly, "for what happened, for the way it happened, for what I allowed Richard Blackwood to convince me to do. I appreciate that, Marcus, but I have to ask, are you apologizing because you realize you were wrong, or because you realize how much it cost you?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands in the same way he had during our termination meeting 2 years earlier. "Both, I suppose, but mostly because I destroyed something valuable for something worthless. I traded away the best employee I ever had for a quick profit that never materialized. It wasn't just me you traded away, Marcus. It was your integrity, your company's reputation, the loyalty of everyone who worked for you." "I know." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I lost everything. The business, my savings, my reputation in the industry. I haven't been able to find work for 8 months. I felt a surge of something I hadn't expected. Sympathy. This broken man sitting across from me had once been my friend, my mentor, someone I had respected and trusted. Seeing him like this should have felt like victory, but instead, it felt like tragedy. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" "I was hoping, I know I don't deserve it, but I was hoping you might consider giving me a chance, a position at Phoenix, any position. I'm a good manager, and I understand this industry. You're asking me for a job? I'm asking for forgiveness and a chance to rebuild what I destroyed." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the parking lot where my Tesla, purchased with Phoenix's first-year profits, sat next to the cars of my employees, good people who had found success by choosing integrity over shortcuts. "Marcus, do Do you know what the hardest part of the last 2 years has been? Probably building a company from scratch while competing with your former employer. No, the hardest part has been learning to trust again, to believe that people can work together without betraying each other for personal gain, to have faith that doing the right thing ultimately leads to success. I turned back to face him. You taught me a valuable lesson, Marcus. You showed me what happens when greed replaces loyalty, when short term thinking replaces long term vision, when fear replaces courage. Sarah, but you also taught me something else. You taught me that I'm stronger than I thought, that my skills and knowledge and integrity are worth more than any salary or title or corporate position, that the best revenge against betrayal is not revenge at all, but success. I returned to my desk and pulled out a business card, writing a name and phone number on the back. This is Patricia Vance at Consolidated Financial. She mentioned to me last week that they're looking for a project manager for their internal IT department. It's not executive level, and it pays about a third of what you used to make at Meridian. But it's honest work for good people, and Patricia believes in second chance. Marcus took the card with trembling hands. Sarah, why would you do this for me? Because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. Because everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life. And because I learned something important from building Phoenix. Success isn't about defeating your enemies, it's about helping your friends. He stood to leave, pausing at the door. Sarah, I want you to know that firing you was the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of what it cost me, but because it was wrong. You deserved better from me. We all deserve better from each other, Marcus. The question is whether we're brave enough to give it. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 2 years ago, I had been a loyal employee who believed that hard work and dedication were enough to ensure security and success. I had trusted others to define my value and determine my future. Today, I was the owner of a thriving company, surrounded by people who shared my vision of what business could be when built on integrity rather than exploitation. I had learned that security comes not from the approval of others, but from the strength of one's own capabilities and character. The story could have ended differently. I could have chosen anger over action, revenge over rebuilding, bitterness over business. But karma, I had learned, isn't about punishment or reward. It's about consequence, the natural result of both choices made and actions taken. Marcus chose betrayal and received isolation. He chose short-term profit and received long-term loss. He chose to eliminate what he saw as obstacles and discovered he had destroyed his own foundation. I chose resilience and received strength. I chose innovation and received success. I chose to build rather than destroy, and discovered that creation is infinitely more satisfying than conquest. As the sun set over the city that evening, I looked out at Phoenix Technologies, the company I had built from nothing, the team I had assembled from cast-offs and outcasts, the technology I had created to solve problems rather than exploit weaknesses. And I understood that the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. The greatest victory is discovering that you never needed their approval in the first place. 6 months later, Phoenix Technologies was acquired by a Fortune 500 company for $47 million, just $3 million less than Marcus had originally hoped to receive for Meridian's assets. The difference was that Phoenix's valuation was based on actual performance, proven technology, and sustainable business practices, while Meridian's had been built on financial engineering and corporate manipulation. I accepted a position as Chief Technology Officer with the acquiring company, along with guaranteed positions for my entire Phoenix team. Marcus, meanwhile, had rebuilt his career as a project manager at Consolidated Financial, where Patricia Vance reported that he had become one of their most reliable and ethical employees. Sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing code or planning new projects, I think about that conference room where my old life ended and my new one began. I think about the man who sat across from me and delivered what he thought was my destruction, never realizing he was actually handing me my liberation. And I think about karma, not as cosmic justice or divine retribution, but as the simple truth that our choices create our reality, that integrity generates trust, and that the best response to betrayal is not revenge, but the relentless pursuit of excellence. In the end, Marcus got exactly what he deserved. a chance to start over and become a better person. And so did I. The only difference was that I had been ready to take it.